Hello, my name is Stephen Taylor. I'm the attorney on behalf of Booze Liquor in this case. I am responding to the argument by the opposing counsel for Lose Liquor. Now, as the opposing counsel in this case for me helpfully pointed out, Booze Liquor does not manufacture the liquor that we sell. We're kind of a wholesaler. We import the liquor and we distribute it. So we don't manufacture it. We're not involved with the bottling process. So that we'll get to a little bit later, but it does speak to our knowledge of the product that we receive. Furthermore, opposing counsel starts by discussing Section 2508, subsection 1 of the UCC, which states that a remedy of non-conforming goods by a seller must be remedied within the time specified in the original contract in order to be considered timely. Now, I don't dispute counsel's position that, opposing counsel's position that time in this case has in fact expired. The allegedly non-conforming delivery was made on the 31st of May, and the contract said that deliveries needed to be made by June 1st. It appears that my client was unable to get the conforming replacement goods to Lose Liquor by the next day, and that they would have been able to do so by June 4th, which was 3 days after the expiration of the period stipulated in the contract. However, we would contend in this case that Section 2508, subsection 1 of the UCC is not the section we're trying to apply here, but rather we are attempting to apply Section 2508, subsection 2, which reads that where the buyer rejects a non-conforming tender which the seller had reasonable grounds to believe would be acceptable with or without money allowance, the seller may, if he seasonably notifies the buyer, have further reasonable time to substitute a conforming tender. So there's a couple of things in this. The buyer has rejected non-conforming tender. That's clear and not really disputed in the case, which the seller had reasonable grounds to believe would be acceptable. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, Booze Liquor, is a distributor, is a wholesaler, is an importer. So the opposing counsel contends that we could have or should have known about the broken bottles as we were transporting them around the warehouse. But it is entirely conceivable in this fact pattern that they weren't broken when they left the warehouse. These are glass bottles being transported in cardboard boxes, and unfortunately they can be jarred around, clink together, and there is a very real risk of them shattering. This is not a fault of Booze Liquor by any means. This is a natural trait of using glass bottles. It's an occupational hazard, if you will, within the liquor industry where most things are carried in glass bottles, at least the quality liquors. So we would contend it's entirely conceivable here that the bottles were broken in transit and shipment after they left the warehouse, and that we had no idea that they were non-conforming. If we had at our warehouse, theoretically, a soaked box, wet with wine, we wouldn't have shipped that box out. We would have been able to clearly tell it was broken and replaced it ahead of time. But that doesn't appear to be the case here, because when we sent them out, we thought that they were conforming goods. Furthermore, in Section 2508, it says that if the seller must seasonably notify the buyer, then they may receive a reasonable time to provide conforming tender. On the same day of the allegedly non-conforming delivery, the 31st, Booze Liquor wrote back to Lose after being informed of the non-conformity and offered to remedy the situation by June 4th. Now, June 4th is only 3 days after the originally agreed upon date, which I think would be within a reasonable amount of time. And now, opposing counsel contends that because they needed the liquor imminently so that they wouldn't end up losing out on a couple of days of sales. But the fact of the matter remains that under the fact pattern, 99% of the shipment was saleable. So unless they were going to sell 99% of the bottles that they just ordered from Booze Liquor in those 3 days, they wouldn't be out of stock. It wouldn't in any sort of tangible way affect the sales of Lose Liquors, the Lose Hipster Bar, whatever. It would just Yeah, it would be a non-issue. They assumedly would not get to the last 1% of those bottles, and even if they were going to order more bottles from a different source, it's highly unlikely that they would have been able to get them there in quicker than the 3 days that Booze Liquor has offered to. So, in summation, Booze Liquor sticks to our contention that Section 2, 508, subsection 2 of the UCC permits us, upon giving our notice to the buyer, this allows us to remedy the non-conforming goods within a reasonable amount of time, which we believe that these 3 days are. We're willing to ship them the additional unbroken bottles and to handle it ourselves, thereby curing the non-conformity in the goods. Thank you for your time.